Okay, everyone. I'm Deborah Klochko, the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Museum of Photographic Arts, and I'd like to welcome you all to Winescapes with Artists, and raise my glass. And today's guest is Cheryl Medow, and I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation that we're going to have. The work is amazing. Before we get started, just a little bit of reminder, you can write your questions, I believe, on the chat, and we're going to keep you muted. So anyway, that is basically the rules that we have. So today's presentation, if we can get the slides up, and we'll be talking with Cheryl about her project called Envisioning Habitat and Altered Reality. And I first came across Cheryl's work. I was thinking about it as I was preparing for this. I first came across your work, Cheryl, at Court & Potts Gallery in San Francisco in 2017. And they were having a group exhibition, and I was immediately drawn to the work that you had as part of that exhibition. Then the next time was 2019. You had a featured exhibition at APAT, the Association of International Photography Art Dealers in New York City, which is a very big deal. And so it was, I was at that second viewing, I got to see more work and was equally fascinated with what you were doing. Could we go to the next slide? And part of what, for those of you that know me, the subject matter is not one that you would normally think about when you think about the kinds of exhibitions that I've worked on, the kind of work that I'm drawn to, but there's something that's absolutely fascinating and breathtaking about the work that you do. And what I wanted to do was have you talk a little bit about your background, because it's complicated in many facets to who you are and what you do. You have an artistic background that was not photography. You have, obviously this passion for your subject matter, but what I'd like to do is have you talk a little bit about your training and what brought you to photographing birds.
Okay. Well, as you said earlier in your last statement, that I have been an artist, I guess, pretty much all my life. I've loved to especially be outdoors. So everything that's in the natural world is probably the most important in terms of how I see everything. I mean, I look at clouds and I don't think to myself, oh my God, it's going to rain. I look at clouds and say, oh my God, how beautiful those are. So there's a part of me that's constantly aware of my surroundings, and even more so than the friendships that I have, which I do have, but the birds seem to be my friends these days. And I love going out into the world to look at them. And I think that what happened after I did printmaking and ceramics, and the 1990s came around, where there was the digital camera and Photoshop. But first, the digital camera, I thought, oh my goodness, I can go out, take pictures of whatever animals I choose to take pictures of, or clouds, mountains, skies, and I can see what it is immediately. And that was very satisfying to me, that I could see what I was doing rather than it being go home, send it out to have it developed and all that. So the camera became a tool for me rather than in any other way. It's just another way, it's my paintbrush. And so I started taking pictures of animals and birds. And it highlighted when I went to Africa in the mid-90s. And I was just fascinated by all the animals. And the gentleman we were with said, "Do you like birds?" And I went, "Oh my God, I love birds. Why?" He says, "Well, when all the animals disappear, the birds are always here." So with that, I started realizing that I was very attuned to any movement in any kind of bush or tree or whatever. And I could recognize the birds, and they became more and more important to me as time went on. But then when
Next
you
slide,
take a
please.
picture of a bird and you're close up to it, or you
Mhm.
have a camera that can, there's nothing in the background. So it's like, well, then that's nice, but how does that work for me as an artist? And so I started creating birds and taking pictures of where they lived or where they didn't live. And then with that artistic expression, putting them together and making new images that are sometimes real and sometimes imagined.
I think your statement of where they sometimes don't live is a really important one that we're going to be talking about a little bit more. So could we go to the next slide, please? Your influences are clearly in painting as well as nature. This is the Hudson River, from the Hudson River School, and it's Thomas Cole from approximately, what, the 1830s? I can't.
Right. 1830s.
Yeah, 1836. And the reason that the slide is here is because the relationship to the background and the drama of the sky in the landscape is clearly something that you were aware of as you were photographing and capturing your own landscapes. The other thing is these are totally fabricated. So this sky, those clouds, that landscape were not painted from reality, but were pieces that the artist put together. And so that artificial reality is something that is really important to understand. These become more of a metaphor for the magnificence of the environment, or the the westward expansion, and certainly the Hudson River School was based in America, but definitely the relationship with your work, let's go to the next slide, is something that's what captured my eye as I looked at your work. That and the references to John James Audubon's work, who was creating his Birds of North America in the 1820s and 30s. And again, he's not depicting fully from life. I mean, he is, well, you don't, but he actually physically shot the birds and then posed them and painted them, captured them. But what was interesting too is there's a level of manipulation that I think is going to be important in talking about your work. Next slide, please. Did you look at a lot of Audubon as you were working?
Oddly enough, I think when I was growing up, I didn't really, if I did see them, I didn't pay attention to it, but I must have, because both those things are quite part of what I do. And, you know, when you think about landscapes, then there's the Monets and everything else where the painting of those backgrounds is really important, as well as the bird that's in them.
Let's go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that I was very taken with was you don't always match the background with the bird.
Right.
And in this case, there's probably more of a match than in some of the others.
Nope.
But you want to talk about this process and where the pieces come from?
Sure. The bird actually was a ding darling preserve on Sanibel Island in Florida. And I just happened to be there when this guy was just running across, and I just snapped a bunch of pictures. And then afterwards, I noticed that there were other birds following him. And when I got home, and this was one where I didn't realize he did have a fish in his mouth until I got back to the room and opened it up and saw what's the seaweed that's doing in his mouth. But so what he's on, in fact, he's pretty much on. But the waves are from Hawaii, and the clouds are from somewhere else. I didn't write down exactly where they were from, but so that what I do when you're talking about putting things together artistically is when I think about all the different components I have, it's how do they work together even if they've never lived together? And those clouds and his feathers have an interaction that for me it makes this work. And it was just so fun watching him do what he did, and then being able to recreate this. I love it.
There's a history in photography of manipulated work from the very beginning. I mean, photographers such as Gustave Le Gray, because of limitations of the photographic process, to get a good foreground or landscape, the sky would be completely blacked out in the negative. And so the photographer would take a separate exposure for the clouds and then put them together in the darkroom. Ansel Adams himself would manipulate his pictures using the zone system, burning and dodging in the darkroom. But the purpose was to create an emotional response to the image, which is different than documenting the image. So the kind of excitement that you feel, your relationship to your subject matter is all enhanced by this approach. So, these are not just scientific documents by any means. They're very, very artistic.
Right. And it is very much having the emotional response rather than somebody asked me what kind of camera did I use, or, they want to just look at the image for what the image is provoking in them and not the technicality of it.
Next slide, please. But do you find that people respond very well, even though they're not sort of scientific documents?
Yes, there's a group of people, usually they're from the Audubon Society, who are very pure in what they think they're supposed to be looking at, and don't. It's not that they don't like it; they don't know how to just enjoy it.
Well, it's interesting because Audubon, always had an affinity for birds. And there's a quote that from him: "I felt an intimacy with them bordering on frenzy that must accompany my steps through life." So he was passionate, and I think that shows in his work as well as your work.
Yeah, I do talk to them a lot.
In the darkroom, or when you're out there shooting?
When I'm taking pictures of them.
Next slide, please. So as you're working, this one is spectacular. I love the drama of that star-filled sky, and the whiteness of the bird, but kind of hiding its head and its feathers. And can you talk about how this came to be?
So, and again in Florida, and Florida is a wonderful place for birding. The egret was on a palmetto. It was pretty much a dead one, but a stump, and I saw him preening himself, and it was in the afternoon light, and I just went, stop, let me get my camera out. And I just was taking quite a number of pictures of him, and he just kept on preening himself. And in this particular instance, he just went right through his feathers, you know, doing what he does. And the shot came out. It was great. And I looked at him for a very long time, trying to put him in some scene. And it was pretty difficult to do because his feathers are so wispy that you don't want, you know, you have to be very artistic and very meticulous about how you fill in the spaces in between the feathers. But what I did like about it is that because he's so white and the background has that kind of dreamy feel to it, and then with the sky again in Hawaii, I seem to be putting Florida and Hawaii together, but that's how that one came about. But I spent a number of years looking at that particular egret and not being able to connect him with something. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about doing the process is that once I do it, because I many times will take pictures and put it behind the bird, because I'm masking out the bird. I put pictures behind it, no, no, no. And then every once in a while, there's just this aha. And when there's an aha, that's when I know I can continue working on it as it is rather than try different things.
I think our next slide will really demonstrate to everyone what that process is. Do you want to take us through that?
So I think all of the owls are from the Cape Coral in Florida, but they also live, and I take pictures of them at the Ontario airport. They seem to be in the fields. Burrowing owls go in underground, so when they come up out, they always seem to be staring at you. I don't know what it is about them. But so on the left, that bird was, I took that bird, his picture. And then I also had been in, the bottom picture in the middle is of Wyoming, and it's just a meandering stream and river in Wyoming. And the clouds, I'm not, again, I combine clouds so much that sometimes I don't remember exactly where they're from, but I pick and choose the clouds as in a painterly kind of way. And then the birds on the right, they're all from different times. And actually the bird in front, who's got his head cocked like that, which he could in fact turn it all the way upside down. He was probably one of the first burrowing owls I saw. And I just was just fascinated by how he would then, you know, it was a baby, so it's looking at you in that quizzical kind of way. And may I just say that when I first went to look for burrowing owls in Cape Coral, Florida, we were driving around, and it's usually in this residential section of town with a library and a baseball field and whatever. And it's like, yeah, they're somewhere. And I always felt like they'd be in some field. So I'd be looking for them. But at the same time, I saw these like little crosses on people's lawns and in different, and I thought, oh my God, what's died here? And then I realized, and was when we went with someone who knew where they were, that that's what they sit on. Well, not in this particular instance, but a lot of times they're just on sticks above their hole because they burrow into the ground. And I just got a good laugh at the fact that, you know, I didn't realize they were really put out there for the owls to perch on. So I combined those, as you can see.
Next slide. Again, a very dramatic one. And this one is probably even more painterly than many of the others, with that background blending, is it water, sky, and so again, you talk about these happening over a long period of time. Do you want to talk about this one?
Well, he's a late afternoon, kind of saw him on this particular rock that was, oh gosh, where is that place? I always forget the name of it. Oh yes, it's the Venice Rookery, again in Florida. And it's a place where an Audubon center is, but also it's a kind of a rookery that you can walk around the whole pond, and in the middle there's an island. And many times different birds during mating season will live there. And this is a young little blue heron. And when they're young, they are white, and they sort of hang out with snowies that are also white. But you can tell that it's a juvenile little blue because of his green legs. And as they get older, they molt their color, and the white turns into gray, turns into more gray, and then they're just a gray bird. It's amazing how they change over time. But and he just was, the wind came up, so all of his feathers went up. And to me, that gave me that feeling of the wispiness in the clouds as well, to accent the bird feathers.
We go to the next slide.
Yeah, those are artistic expressions that just happen as you
So this one is fairly dramatic. And I especially like the lighting on this because it really doesn't match. And it's that disconnect with reality that is, and I mean the strong front lighting and then the kind of different lighting for the background.
Right.
So is this Africa?
Yes, those saddle-billed storks are pretty big, and they do live in Africa, but they are not as tall as an elephant who's in the background. So again, that to me is more that Audubon, without realizing it, kind of way of dealing with the background and the foreground. That the foreground, the bird becomes really majestic and large, but you can't help but notice the background as well.
Next slide. So you've traveled, how many countries have you traveled in capturing your birds?
Oh my, I don't know how many countries I've been to. I've been to South America and then in Costa Rica and places of that sort. I went to the Galapagos, and in Africa, it's East Africa and South Africa. In the United States, it's on this coast and Florida, a little bit in Texas, but not too much, and a little bit in Washington State. And I've never been to Australia, and they have incredible birds and parrots and whatnot there, but I have not been there.
New Zealand too, flightless, everything's flightless. So do you choose the location and then look for birds, or are you searching for specific birds, or is it a combination?
I think it's probably a combination, but we went down to Desert Hot Springs and stayed somewhere, and where I started seeing these guys instead of on a lawn or in the background actually is Death Valley, was the parking lot. I mean, they just go everywhere. So nowadays I do pick where I go to visit as to whether or not there's going to be birds there. So going up to Washington State, I had this desire over the last few years. I really would like to see bald eagles. So we went there and up into Canada when it was still open, and to do that. And so for here, it was down in the Palm Springs area.
Next slide. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, there we go. So I love what you've done with the sky, with the pink touches for the flamingos.
Yeah, it's interesting because the flamingos are in the Yucatan at Rio Lagartos, which is about 2-hour drive east. No, west of Cancun. And it's a beautiful estuary there. And you can go in a boat. And then what I did is I took my tripod and me, put them out in the boat. And the water is probably about, I don't know, 3 feet deep. Maybe, no, not even that. Just about 24 inches maybe. And I just planted my tripod and then took different pictures. So it depended on where we were in the estuary. The background actually is from the Galapagos, which is kind of interesting but it has that same kind of feel that the estuary did. Mm-hmm. And the sky, in fact, is from the Yucatan, because one of the things that's really breathtaking about the sky as you go south from, let's say, Santa Barbara or even San Diego, I think, is that the pinkness and everything in the sky is just magnificent. Although recently we've had some really incredible skies, even here.
Next slide. So on average, when you're out shooting, I mean, can you take us through what a typical day would be like? How long are you out? What time of day do you go out?
Well, I usually go out in the early morning, so anywhere around 6:37 to about 9 in the morning, and about 4 to whenever sort of sundown comes around. Certainly if there's overcast skies, you can go out anytime. You won't get that, blown out whites when you're taking photographs. But it doesn't leave you with the bird itself having any highlights. You'd have to actually put them in, and it's better to start with a good photograph than try and manipulate a bad one. So I do early morning and late afternoon shoots, and that pretty much works. Mm-hmm. If I'm in Africa, then I'm usually in a car driving around. If I'm in some of the places in Florida, you could drive by car or you could walk. And I usually carry a wagon behind me with my 600 lens and camera and tripod in it, and drag around and wait and try and find something. Around here in Santa Barbara, I can drive to a few places and do that kind of walking. I'm assuming I can do that in San Diego as well.
Next slide.
Louisiana.
Again, that starry sky is just really dramatic, wonderfully dramatic. So were these two birds together, or?
Yes, these guys were. They were, and it was extremely windy. I think that they were just going, excuse me, this is my stump and I'm going to fish here. You go away. That would be my thought on them. And there were hundreds of birds in this place in the Bayou Sauvage in Louisiana. It's across from New Orleans. Just a little story. I got out of the car, set up my thing, and it was really windy. So I had to really hold my camera tight. But because we were on the estuary, was right off the side of a highway. And as I was taking pictures, these trucks were going by at 50 miles an hour. And so the ground was shaking. And it was really difficult to get shots that were like not fuzzy. But it was lots of fun. Lots of fun. I mean, and it's.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So you
As
obviously,
you can see, I get all excited about it.
I could tell, I can tell.
It's like I'm living it all over again.
So you obviously, because you wait for the right match between the bird and the background, you must have a fair number of birds waiting for their stage in a way.
That's true. That's true. And some I don't get to for several years and then go back. And especially what's interesting now with this COVID situation is that because I haven't been able to go out birding, I've gone into my library and gone, oh, look, there's another one. Wow, I think there's another one. So yes, that does happen.
Next slide. Here's your bald eagle.
Yeah, there's Washington. And there's a Montana mountain. They are majestic. They are quite something.
Did you go to the area near Whittier, between Vancouver and Whittier, where all the bald eagles are, or?
No, I didn't. And I actually have been thinking about, shouldn't I go to Juneau? What's so funny about Juneau that people have been telling me about is if you think that pigeons, there are a lot of pigeons around here, you should go up to Juneau because that's the way the bald eagles are. They're so plentiful up there, and you know, down south they're not as much.
Next slide. And here they are.
Yeah. Now these guys do have short tails, if you notice, and they're kind of stocky, and they burrow underground.
So the crosses that you were talking about, do people put them there to also mark the burrow, or they're just there?
So, but I think that it's especially there because the birds do like to perch there, and then they fly off and come back with something that they've eaten or whatever. So it's twofold, and especially in Cape Coral, I think that they are. You cannot, if one burrows in your yard, you cannot remove it. So it's like you're staked.
So in the sky, as we're looking at that, the kind of warm tones next to the colder gray tones, how much of that have you added in or enhanced with Photoshop? And how much of it is just, that's the color that the sky was?
Some of the sky is like that. And then sometimes because the whites are not really, when you use your camera, at least I haven't found that I can always get the whites to be white. And so they may have a color in them that isn't satisfying or pleasing in a particular picture. So I'll move it to a warmer tone or not. And I probably did that here, because the warmer tone goes better with the landscape, as you can, yeah.
Next slide, please.
That's that painterliness. So this guy is also an owl. He's smaller than the other one. He has a longer tail. And he was kind of cool because he only is about 6 or 7 inches tall. And he was in a tree, and he was in Africa, in Botswana, and the guy was driving very fast to get back to the place that we were staying, and I made him stop and slowly go backwards because I saw him in the tree. And that's when I knew, I really knew my birds, when I was doing it better than the guy who was taking us. He didn't seem to care, I did.
Next slide.
I think actually this one is from Out of Africa, when, I don't know if you saw the movie, but when she was holding a little owl, that was the kind of owl it was.
And then where's this bird from? And is that a monarch butterfly?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I took that butterfly, but it wouldn't have been too far from here. The water feature is in Florida, at Fort Myers, but the bird is from Botswana. They're a lot in pretty much in Southern Africa, and they're now called lapwings. They've had a change of name. And I guess the flowers I'm not, you know what? I don't remember where the flowers are from. I usually know. But it just seemed as though he needed something to go with his his bright yellow eye. And he squawks to say, get away, because his family nests right on the ground. So they're right out, they're sort of camouflaged, but they squawk if you're anywhere near the place where they're denning, not denning, but nesting.
So it's so interesting to me to hear you talk about these, because it's this kind of combination of aesthetic choices and kind of the nature, the true nature of the bird and its life. Can we go on to the next slide? And it also makes me think about the fact that you are mixing, as you mentioned, such diverse location with the bird. Again, it's more than just the emotional response. I mean, clearly you care about these birds and you care about their existence within all of nature. Do you feel that that's, how important is that to you overall?
It has become very important. I've noticed that with climate change, with all that's going on, that one of the things that, in a sense, I'm looking at and wanting to convey is how important and how beautiful the world is out there in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you just go outside and look, you'll find something everywhere that's really beautiful to look at. And so I really enjoy putting these birds in surroundings that enhance them and actually are really beautiful to look at on their own. So it's sort of a combination of the two. But to me, it's just really important to, I mean, these images to me translate the beauty in nature. And it's really important that we are the stewards of keeping this this beautiful planet beautiful. So
next slide.
Oh, these guys have a story.
Okay.
I was never very fond of the guinea fowl because they are so strange looking. And what I've noticed lately, that even in the strangest and ugliest of little birds, there is something absolutely stunning about them. And of course, their feathers are the most stunning. These guys are always sort of on the road running, and they're in Africa. And as you are driving down the road, they're usually in front of the car and they never get out of the way. So you have to go very slow while they're running. And when you have a flock of these guys, it's called a confusion. Mm-hmm. And I really do think they are confused as they run. So it's a perfect word for the flock of them. And of course, then they all go off onto the road. And every once in a while, you can get them standing in one place rather than running. And so that's where this finally came into together.
And it's interesting, your artistic choices for the background and the ground are some of the simpler ones of what we've seen, because it allows the feathers, the pattern in the feathers, to really take over and draw our eye to that. So next slide, please. Zebras and
secretary-birds.
Yeah.
Secretary-birds are great. They live in Africa. They supposedly were given that name because of the quills on their head. And someone back in the 1800s said, "Oh yeah, why don't we come?" Because they used quills to write with. So hence the name. But they stomp around on the savanna, and as they walk, they're stomping their feet to try and get snakes or other insects to jump up out of underneath the ground. And I must have spent hours and hours following these guys. This last time when I went in 2000, and it was in 2020 at the beginning of the year, and I never got them with a snake in their mouth. So I guess they went hungry, but I didn't, because I have great pictures of them on the plains, and I just think they're just great. And I think they go well with the zebras. It sort of gives them a place of being where in fact they are.
And again, that fact that they dominate over the zebras, that's playing with scale that you've done
Right.
before.
Right.
Let's go to the next one. So this is the tiniest bird we've seen so far.
Right. This is one of the many bee-eaters, and they aren't that big. They're kind of small, but he's a medium-sized one, and he where I've seen them is in Kenya, and off an island in Lamu, which is a great little island, and they come to the island, and I think they migrate from up north, and it's one of the places that they stop along the way. And they are carmine. They are an amazing color, and hence Carmine Bee-eater. But there is a northern and a southern, but I never really saw a big difference in the two. And the sky is from down in the Yucatan, I think, in Tulum.
So what birds haven't you captured that really are on your top 10 list?
On my list. There's some other bee-eaters that I'd really like to take pictures of. And I have a few shots of different ones, but none that, they're so small that if you don't get close enough to them, they are not going to be able to be blown up and work. There's some different kinds of spoonbills that to me are fascinating, that I wouldn't mind taking pictures of. But I also think that the pictures of birds I'd like to take, I don't know who they are yet, because there are so many species that it's almost like, well, I need to go somewhere new, such as New Zealand or Australia or something like that. And even just to be able to see them. It's interesting because when I first went to Costa Rica, I was taking pictures of birds then, and there was someone who came out of their room and said, "Oh, I just heard a da-da-da-da." And I thought, "Did you see him?" "No, I just heard him, and I wrote it in my book." And I realized he was a birder. I'm a bird photographer, which is that if you're a birder, all you need to do is hear it, and you could say you've known it. So I love looking at birds and seeing them. So I'm not sure what's really on my list. I'll know when I see it. Oh, look. The bald eagle, I must say that one was on my list for a while.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the next slide, and we can talk about the actual prints. You do all your own printing?
No, I do the small prints.
Okay.
This was in Chicago, and these prints are done by a gentleman named Mac Holbert. He's a master printmaker. I've known him for over 20 years, and he now lives in Ashland, and he's with Art Authority. It's a place that they do printing. And because the space that I have to work at in my studio doesn't really work well with having a big, huge printer.
Mm-hmm.
I decided that he would print my large prints, which is anything that's 16 and 20 and above, and I would just print the small ones. It's worked very well.
Can we go to the next slide? I think we have some different sized prints. Yes.
Right. And so small, medium, large, and then the one that I'm next to is, that one actually is the size of 40 by 32. And just recently, the gallery that I work with in Dallas, Texas, the Photographs Do Not Bend, PDNB gallery, asked me if I could print one 60 by 48. And I went, really? And so we are now calling it a museum size. And that's not up there, but all the others are.
So do you sell through your website or do you direct people to the gallery?
I do it mainly through the gallery.
Okay.
And yeah, so they're the ones to call when you want one of my prints.
And do you do editions for your prints?
Yes, the largest one that you see here is an edition of 5. And the next one down is an edition of 6. The medium size is an edition of 10, and the very small ones are an edition of 25.
And I know prices go up as the editions start selling out, but
Yes.
what is the range from
So
the general range of
the
price?
smallest is anywhere from, I think it's either 1,000 to 1,200, and the very largest now is at 5. And I believe the one I'm holding here is at 3,500 at the moment.
Mhm.
So, and you're right, the price goes up as the edition gets gone through. So
Great. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here you are at work.
yeah, I'm at work. Someone else is saying, okay, I'll take a picture of her. And so there I am. And what's very funny about this picture, when I noticed that the 2 pictures that I have you, is that scarf I have around my neck.
Mm-hmm.
I have been wearing that scarf for 20 years. Whenever I go somewhere that's a little cold, that's it's as though, I guess we're all superstitious in one way or another. And that one's mine. I need to put that around my neck.
So,
But that's my 600
okay.
lens.
So do you take just one lens with you on these trips?
No, because night skies are usually a 24 by 70 lens. Other times you might want to have a different size lens. So the 600 is one. Another one is a 2 to 400. There's about 3 or 4 lenses that I might interchange with, but when I'm taking pictures of birds, it's usually the 600 on a tripod. And then landscape is, the wider angled lenses.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide.
So see, there's that scarf again.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought it was maybe camouflage a little bit, so.
Yeah, that's my work clothes.
And do we have a video? The next slide, is that a short video?
There is a video, but what it is, let's see if that's the last one.
There's one more slide.
Before that, which takes me way back to to when I first started doing all of this. I was in Costa Rica, and we went to a place called Peace Lodge, and I looked it up. It's still there. They had had an earthquake and this and that. Anyway, it was an enclosed space where the birds kind of went free, but within a certain acreage. And this macaw came at me. And of course, someone snapped the picture. But what that macaw was really after was my earring. and I lucked out because they have been known to see shiny objects and go for them. So it was like, and that was a wild bird. So that was quite some time ago, but I thought that was kind of a funny. And see, and I haven't taken any pictures of macaws.
I was going to say, I haven't seen any of. Okay. So does anybody have any questions? Do you have anything more you want to share? I mean, it's been a wonderful journey through nature and unreality at the same time. So it's, again, that's what appealed to me from the very beginning of seeing your work. And also, in a way, the compulsion to go out and capture those birds. It's not an easy task. So it's, but it's been a great journey, it sounds like.
Yeah. I think that that's actually what is so, that I like so much about it. It's like the harder the better. Birds fly away.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be stealth. And, you know, there's so many things that go into waiting for that bird to be there.
Okay. So let's show the video if we can. And I think we have enough time. And while we're doing that, I just want to make sure that, okay, here we go.
Yes, yes.
Breakfast.
Oh. Is this superb?
That's enough.
Sweet.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, for taking us on the journey with you and sharing your work. And again, you have a great website. So I recommend anybody that wants to see more, learn more, go to Cheryl's website. And also it will link you to her gallery. So unless you have questions, I would like to just thank you so much for all that you've done and sharing it with us.
Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time and energy in this. This was fabulous. Thank you.
And if you go to the chats, people can see your Instagram and Facebook, and it also lists your website. So again, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. And I feel like I've traveled the world, even though I'm stuck home with the pandemic. So thank you for that. And we'll talk again.
Okay.
And we'll get you down to San Diego so that you can show your work and take more pictures. So
be great.
And the video will be posted and available next week for those of you that want to view it again or want to recommend it to your friends. So thank you again from MOPA to all of you, and Cheryl, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.